Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Ayşe Süberkaş. Back in March, leaders from the Organisation of Turkic States signed an agreement to set up an investment fund to further integrate the Turkic-speaking world. Although starting with a modest amount of $500 million, the OTS says the fund will create more strategic autonomy for member states. Once established, the fund will focus on supporting small and medium-sized businesses to help spur job growth and innovation. The fund will also focus on supporting critical industries, including agriculture, transport, technology, tourism, and energy. The OTS, which comprises Turkyie and several former Soviet states across the Caucasus and Central Asia, is home to vast reserves of both natural gas, oil, and other crucial minerals. And just this past Friday, Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan met with the Secretary General of the OTS in Ankara. The two discussed enhancing trade and investment across the Turkic world and preparing for the next OTS summit, which will take place in Kazakhstan later this year. And to further discuss the Turkic Investment Fund, joining me now from Brussels is Samuel Doveri-Vesterby. He is the Managing Director of the European Neighbourhood Council. And from Prague, Bruce Panier. He's a Central Asia analyst. Gentlemen, welcome to Straight Talk. It's good to have you on the program. Samuel, the Turkic Investment Fund is the first joint financial organization of the Turkic states. What's its significance and what does this tell us about the shape of intergovernmental relations in the region?
Well, I think it's significant primarily because it's the first time in history that all of the Turkic cultural and Turkic-speaking countries come together in such an institutionalized fashion to develop an investment fund worth this amount in order to tackle quite specific needs in areas really as diverse as agriculture, tourism and industry, infrastructure, and so forth. So I think that's already a very, very important concrete step which is being taken by this fund under the Organisation of Turkic States.
So, Bruce, how do you think this fund will contribute to the development of economic ties across the Turkic world? I mean, how would it cater to the needs of member states?
Well, certainly it builds partnerships among the states, and both on bilateral, multilateral basis. So this is good for cooperation between the countries. You know, they're trying to carve out the middle corridor and make it a little bit more open so that it can replace some of the northern corridor that's been shut down by Russia. So the timing is fantastic for a project like this. And the fact that they can add this component of financial assistance among the states, frees them up from some of the pressures and complications they had with larger international organizations. It certainly, as I mentioned, it brings them closer together in that way, and it helps them create what I think Erdogan always wanted in the first place was kind of a regional bloc that has international stature.
So leaders from the OTS, Samuel, said the fund will break the influence of international financial organizations and reinforce the Turkic world's strategic autonomy. What did they mean by that?
Well, I think for a very long period of time, many of the countries along what Bruce mentioned, the middle corridor, the Turkic countries in Central Asia and also in the Caucasus, have been under a very heavy-handed, nearly neo-colonial at times, pressure and influence by some neighboring countries to the north. And I think that many of these countries are genuinely looking for a new independent to finance their own infrastructure projects, to finance their own regional cooperation, and essentially to put themselves on the map internationally as an entity of countries that are saying, I'm no longer necessarily the only part of the East or the West. We're an independent bloc that aim to support our new strategic motivations, which are linked essentially to the middle corridor. And here, I think it's pretty clear when one looks at, for example, some of the statements which have come from Azerbaijani president, as well as Kazakhstan's president, Turkey's president, and many of the other leaders in this region who have really been essentially focusing on trying to get fair funding to develop more regional cohesion and more regional bonds, especially in infrastructure, customs, border management, and so forth, particularly for reasons linked to supply chains, critical raw materials, and other areas that are essential interest for the Middle Corridor and for the well-being and independence of these countries.
So, Bruce, do member countries have enough money and resources to turn this fund into a powerful organization? And is $500 million enough to start off such an initiative?
Well, it's a rather modest amount, that's for sure. But I would expect that would grow. Now, as far as the individual members have the financial wherewithal to fund this, I mean, it really changes from country to country here. Certainly Kazakhstan and Azerbaijan with their oil exports, and Azerbaijan also with this gas exports are financially set. They can absolutely do this. Uzbekistan's had some financial setbacks in recent years, so it probably is capable, although it'd be a little bit more of a strain. Kyrgyzstan is kind of a question. It's a poor country, but at the same time, I think we can't emphasize enough that the feeling among these countries is more of an equal partnership than they have with any of these other organizations that they're dealing with. Samuel mentioned the countries to the north. When you're dealing with Russia, or when you're dealing with China to the east, or when you're dealing with the IMF or World Bank, if you're an individual country in Central Asia or Azerbaijan, you're a very small country, a small partner in all this. Whereas, amongst the five of them, there is more of a feeling of equality. So I think the comfort zone, so to speak, is much larger for these countries to deal with, each other, and that they're going to do a lot better trading and financing projects among themselves than they would to be reaching out to other countries and other financial organizations that are far larger and have much more say in how they spend.
So, Samuel, how will the Turkic Investment Fund will function? Is it going to end up with an IMF-style structure, and would it be open to other countries outside of the region?
Well, there are a lot of questions that don't have answers yet, to be honest. As far as I can understand, number one, there will be grants, some type of microloans to finance SMEs, but there will also be larger, more kind of IMF-style support in terms of things like infrastructure projects linked to Trans-Caspian logistics, for example, shipbuilding, or Alat Port in the Caspian, or Aktau in Kazakhstan. And so, as far as I can understand, there will be these types of projects, as well as some public-private partnership projects, which have also been raised as priorities by several diplomats I've been speaking to. Mm-hmm. But at the moment, the toolbox, or the availability of projects, is very large. And it will be interesting to see, since we've only just seen the ratification of the investment fund in the parliament of Azerbaijan, and it was only just ratified by Turkyie some months ago. So it will be interesting to see in the upcoming months which direction this takes. I mean, it can really take a lot of different directions, yes. But as I mentioned, public-private partnerships look like one of them.
So, Bruce, what external factors besides COVID-19 pandemic and Russia's attack on Ukraine have pushed those countries to move towards alternative options?
Well, I think the two reasons you mentioned are certainly probably the prevalent ones in this case. But, the timing is ideal because Russia's war in Ukraine has raised a lot of questions about trading through the Northern Corridor and made it essential that there's another trade route, not only to link Central Asia with Europe, but also between China and Europe, too. So there's a new importance on this middle corridor that we were mentioning. So it's an opportunity for the countries involved to really become a much more powerful force, in international trade in the coming years. So again, timing incredibly fortuitous for them. The question is, can they push this ahead? They were also fortunate that a lot of the infrastructure is already in place. There's still work to be done.
So, Samuel, how is the West viewing these countries' efforts to pursue more interdependent policies?
Well, I mean, I think the European Union has been at the forefront of pursuing a policy of especially Central Asian regional integration. So, for example, through projects like BOMKA on border management, as well as customs and many other, let's say, more soft infrastructure connectivity, but essential components of allowing for inter-regional trade and intra-regional decision-making to grow have been at the forefront of the EU's policies and its strategy since 2019 with Central Asia. And of course, since the war in Ukraine, because of the EU's heavy dependence in the past on Russia for gas and energy, but also to a smaller degree on trade, a lot of that has now been pushed down towards the middle corridor, and hence it's very much in the EU's advantage to see Turkey and Central Asia and the Caucasus pursue a more independent and stronger trade and energy policy.
So, but Bruce, what about the Russian position? Is Moscow ready to let these nations move away from their decades-long dependency on the Russian Federation?
I'm sure that the Kremlin would rather it did not happen the way it's happening right now. They have their hands full with the war in Ukraine, so I'm not sure there's a lot they can do about it. You know, Turkey is an interesting country in recent years because Erdogan has really pushed it to the fore. He considers Turkey to be an international player, and he has stood up to Moscow before. This is something that's been seen in Central Asia, and I'm sure in Azerbaijan also, is that Erdogan is not afraid to tell Moscow, no, I'm not doing that, or I don't agree with your terms, and I won't, I'm not going to go along with this. So, Moscow doesn't like it. They would rather that Central Asia was heavily dependent upon Russia for years and years to come. The fact is that the Kremlin has put itself in a very difficult situation by starting this war in Ukraine, and it's made all its partners, former partners, have to reassess, one, their relationship with Russia, and two, their possibilities for the future. Which direction are they going to head, moving forward? Being dependent upon Russia right now is not working out for them, and that is what's pushing this drive to open up the middle corridor. Now, it's just, again, it's great coincidence of timing that it happened at the same time that the Turkish President Erdogan has been pushing for the Organization of Turkic States to take a much more prominent role.
Yes.
And again, not just in regional politics, but to build itself into something of an international bloc that has some kind of real respect and stature.
All right, gentlemen, unfortunately, we'll have to leave it here. Thank you very much for joining me on Straight Talk.